What are the three major currencies in any project that you have going on? Money, time, and energy. And when you're working on producing a Christmas service, particularly as a volunteer, you're probably going to run across issues on any of these and possibly all three. So today we're going to talk about
money.
We all know programs and special services can get really expensive, especially if you're working with set design, costumes, or you're producing a brand new program every single year. And when I was working on my first production, I was a little bit stumped with this at first. I wanted to do more than just a typical, essentially a church service, but not go all the way to a cardboard backdrop and bathrobed shepherds.
Am I right?
So here is how I produced multiple productions, each under $200. Now, we do have to recognize that sometimes there are hidden costs that are absorbed into other aspects of a church's budget, so it might not be doable for every single church to follow these guidelines and come in under that amount. This is just how it happened to work out in my experience. What we chose to spend money on primarily was music and music licensing. It's important to license the correct number of copies for all the people who will be using the music. Someone put a lot of work into composing, arranging, and transcribing it. We need to pay them what they're due. Secondly, sometimes you need extra tech equipment. The first year that I produced a production, we were short on a few mics and the XLR cables to go along with them. And thankfully, there was space in the church's AV budget for that year to accommodate those costs. So those were kind of an outlier. They would have, of course, pushed our investment for that year over that $200 mark, but because they fit into the larger AV budget for that year, and then we used them year after year after year, not only specifically for Christmas productions, of course, but for every other kind of service, whether it was for a specific ministry or the church at large, those were used as part of the larger church operation. So I'm not counting them, but they were something that we did need to expand upon one time. Another thing that was a significant expense for the first year and then again was used year over year, I think I had to replace a few the third time, were script binders. Our church had these kind of smaller choir folders that we used the first year. The second year, I went ahead and just bought a dozen or so Amazon black binders, an inch wide, and we put all of our scripts and all of our music in there so that everyone had matching binders. And even that purchase came out that particular year to under the budget that we had set for that year, and then those binders were still able to be used the following year and in future programs. You always have one or two that go missing each year, and that's understandable, but overall it is just a one-time cost. And that's pretty much all we spent on. So here's what we chose not to do. We didn't do any sort of costumes. Any of the productions that I produced, participants just stuck to a specific dress code. I usually had them stay in dark colors, muted colors, navy, burgundy, emerald green, forest green, that sort of palette that kept the tone somewhat formal, a little bit more formal than a traditional church service, but very Christmassy and had a festive air to it at the same time. And I don't know how your church was set up, but every single participant in these Christmas productions were 100% volunteer, myself included, so I had an amazing group of people to work with. From our AV team to our ushers to the people who were up front singing and speaking, everyone was very generous with their time and with their talent. As far as set and backdrop, we kept it really simple. Every year this church puts up a whole bunch of Christmas trees across the back of the platform. It's a really gorgeous space in general for Christmas, so we just used that setup and cleared off any extras that we didn't need for this particular service and rearranged equipment as needed. That particular setting also had 2 drop-down projection screens, and so our amazing and talented administrative assistant and graphics designer at the church also designed custom backdrops that we used throughout the production. There are also ways to do very inexpensive vignettes or set pieces kind of as individuals. I was working on a Good Friday production for this last spring that did not happen, but the part of the design for it included a set piece built around a communion table and just kind of had a vignette built around it. So it was using home decor and other decor items and bringing some pieces together to create that scene very, very inexpensively. Overall, limiting ourselves to the tech and equipment that we had available. Obviously, I've told the story about needing to buy new mics and new mic cords for one production, but we never bought new monitors. We didn't upgrade other equipment just because. We only did those because they were needed that one time, and then we used them year over year. But there was no specialty equipment or anything fancy, no uplighting, no smoke machines or anything like that for these particular productions. And then of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, some costs are absorbed into the general operations expenses of a church. I was able to print out all of the scripts, which then just becomes part of the office admin costs, that sort of thing. There's just these little pieces that come into play, but they just happen to be worked into the larger church budget. I think so much of it is really a mindset on maximizing the parts that matter and not needing a bunch of extras and accessories and accoutrements to make that meaning happen or to present it. For me as a director, what really matters is eternal truth presented through really meaningful and purposeful words and gorgeous music. And what I've come to find is that the more time that I spend in terms of energy and organization and coordinating and planning and writing, the less need there is to spend actual funds on accessories and tools and components, as much as some of them are needed, because so much effort is put into delivering and creating this message. That is where this program really comes together beautifully, and you don't need a bunch of special effects to make it special. So whatever budget you have to work with, I say start with what is most important to you. For me, it was music, and then expanding some of our technical components and some very basic logistics, and then expand from there. Potentially there's a little bit of extra room in the budget to create a vignette or to add some pieces or add to the larger church collection of accessories or decor that can be used in future programs. So think through, whenever you're purchasing artifacts or items, think through what can be modified for a different holiday, used in other services, or repeated next year without it being so specialized that it's instantly recognizable as, oh yeah, they bought it for that one production way back when. I'm definitely a fan of the more minimalist side of church Christmas productions. I've been to some amazing performances though that were just decked out. The church went all out and they were so beautifully put together. So I love attending those ones. I just haven't produced that style before, so that's why this video is focused on a very pared down minimalist style. But whatever your church's style is, whatever you're able to envision and make happen, I say go for it and be creative and have a blast getting to do that. But I think the main message of this is, regardless of what budget you have to work with, there's so much creativity and thoughtfulness and meaningfulness and heart that you can bring to a production without having to use all of those extra pieces. They're not necessary so much as it's your heart, your energy, your participants, your team, your people, and your church coming together that's going to be what makes it a really beautiful, meaningful, and special service.